Have you ever noticed how some people change the moment you stop being easy to control? One day they're warm, agreeable, even kind. The next, something shifts. Not loudly, not obviously, but you feel it. The silence, the subtle tension, the way the room grows colder when you speak. When manipulation fails, they don't disappear. They adapt, like a shadow that moves with you. They smile, but it's no longer sincerity, it's strategy. Because once they realize they can't control you, they begin trying to control how others see you. Not through truth, but through distortion. Not through honesty, but through illusion. This isn't just about toxic people, it's about clarity, about seeing the game before it plays out, and choosing not to participate. So, how do you recognize when someone's influence turns into something more corrosive? And more importantly, how do you hold your ground without losing your peace? Let's explore this together, because once you see it clearly, you'll never be caught in their web again. Stay with me. You're about to learn something that may change not just how you respond, but who you choose to become. Number 1, they try to shame you publicly. When they can't manipulate you behind closed doors, they don't retreat. They escalate. The silent treatments, the passive digs, the subtle guilt no longer work. You've grown too steady, too aware, too unmoved. So they take it public. They try to humiliate you not in whispers, but in front of a crowd. This is their last resort, the dirty trick that comes when private influence fails, public shaming. Why do they do it? Because they're hoping fear will succeed where manipulation failed. Fear of being laughed at, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being made to look small. They know they can't control you in private anymore, so now they weaponize the audience. In meetings, they interrupt. In group settings, they make snide jokes masked as humor. They question your intelligence with a smirk. They tilt their tone just enough so that others think it's harmless, while you feel every word like a blade. And when you call them out, they say, "Relax, I'm only joking." Or worse, "You're taking this too seriously." But deep down, you know the truth. You see the pattern. They're not laughing with you. They're using the laughter to cut deeper. They're not confused. They're strategic. They're not powerful. They're desperate. And here's where the teachings of Stoicism become your anchor. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know the truth." A Stoic doesn't hand over their peace to the crowd. You don't shrink because others misunderstand you. You don't fold because your voice was mocked. And you certainly don't let someone else's performance dictate your perception of yourself. You see, shame only works when you accept it. It's not an emotion that arises from within. It's a projection thrown at you, a mask handed to you with the expectation that you'll wear it. But if you don't pick it up, if you don't put it on, it holds no power. Shame becomes powerless the moment you decide that your worth isn't up for debate. It's not assigned by applause or diminished by silence. It simply is, rooted in your character and your actions. Let me share with you a story. There was a woman named Eleanor, measured, composed, unshakably calm. Her manager, frustrated by her self-possession, began to test her publicly. During meetings, he would roll his eyes. He'd interrupt her, rephrase her ideas as if they were his own, and once even said with a smug grin, "Maybe we should get Eleanor a trophy. She stayed late twice this month." Laughter filled the room. But Eleanor, she didn't flinch. She let the silence speak. And then, with a steady voice, said, "Working late isn't a badge. It's a sign the system is failing." The room fell quiet. No anger, no accusation, just clarity. That moment, The mask fell, not hers, his. This is the strength Stoicism teaches, composure in the storm. Not detachment from pain, but discipline in the face of it. Not the absence of feeling, but the refusal to let feeling rule. Public humiliation only succeeds if it shakes the foundation you've built privately. But if your house is built on reason, on integrity, on self-command, no audience can tear it down. So, what should you do when someone tries to shame you publicly? First, hold your ground. Don't let their words reach into your center. Their aim is not truth, it's disruption. Don't give them that victory. Second, resist the urge to retaliate. Remember, they want your reaction. They want to pull you into their theater. Decline the invitation. Your silence will echo louder than their noise. And third, trust that time reveals everything. The crowd may not see clearly now, but truth, in time, has a way of becoming undeniable. You don't need to prove your worth in the moment. You only need to keep walking in it. In the end, your strength is not in how loudly you respond, but in how little you need to. When shame no longer finds a place to land inside you, it loses all its weight. And those who wield it? They're left holding nothing. This is how you win, not through shouting, not through revenge, but through unshakable calm. Let them mock. Let them misunderstand. You don't owe them your reaction. You owe yourself your peace. That's the Stoic way. And once they realize shame doesn't stick to you, they lose their only weapon. And you walk away untouched, still whole, still sovereign, still standing. Number 2, they play the victim. When manipulators realize they can no longer control you, they don't disappear, they change masks. And the one they reach for next? Victimhood. It's not subtle, it's strategic, and it's one of the dirtiest tricks they know. The moment you stop responding to their guilt-laced words, the moment you start setting boundaries they can't cross, the moment you begin protecting your peace instead of their ego, that's when they flip the narrative. Suddenly, you're the problem. You're the cold one, the selfish one, the ungrateful one, and they're just the misunderstood soul who tried their best. This isn't a cry for truth. It's a move for control. When they can't bend your will, they try to bend perception. They don't fight you directly anymore. They fight your image in the eyes of others. They exaggerate. They distort. They rewrite your boundaries as betrayal and your silence as cruelty. And the goal? Simple. To discredit your strength and cast you as the villain in a story they're now narrating. But here's the truth. When someone must perform pain to mask their loss of power, what you're witnessing is not sadness. It's desperation. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes essential, not as a defense, but as a compass. Epictetus said, "He who blames others has a long road ahead." And nowhere is this more clear than in the theater of false victimhood. The Stoic doesn't fight every distortion. They don't chase every whisper. They stand where they are, unmoved. Not because they're passive, but because they know the difference between noise and necessity. The goal of a Stoic life isn't to control what others believe. It's to control what you believe about yourself when others try to twist your truth. Let me share a story. A woman I once knew, let's call her Elise, spent years in a relationship built on quiet imbalance. She gave more than she received, bent where she should have stood, tolerated what she should have walked away from. But something changed. Slowly, she began to reclaim herself. She said no when before she said nothing. She left when before she stayed. She stopped justifying her peace. And that's when the story shifted. Not hers, but his. Her partner didn't argue. He didn't try to reason. He did something more damaging. He played the victim. He told mutual friends, "I don't know what's happened to Elise. She's so distant now, so cold." He painted her growth as betrayal, her boundaries as abandonment. But Elise, she didn't run from room to room defending herself. She didn't correct every misinterpretation. She understood a deeper truth. When you stop being who someone can manipulate, they often turn to manipulation of the narrative. But the wise don't chase approval. They don't panic when they're misunderstood. They live in alignment with what is real, not what is rehearsed. And in time, the truth always outlives the performance. So how do you respond when someone weaponizes the role of the victim to distort your strength? You stay calm. Do not enter the theater they've created. Drama can only feed on reaction. Don't provide it. You stand still in your truth. Not everything deserves a defense. The life you live, the consistency of your actions, the clarity of your character, these are your answers. And you don't shrink. Never apologize for becoming harder to exploit. If your boundaries make others uncomfortable, let them feel it. That discomfort is theirs to carry, not yours. The Stoic doesn't respond to distortion with noise. They respond with integrity. They trust that what is true does not need applause to remain valid. It simply needs to endure. Because when someone has to pretend to be the victim just to paint you as the villain, you've already won something far more powerful than their approval. You've reclaimed your self-authority. Let them twist the story. Let them seek sympathy. Let them perform. But don't let them pull you back into the script. Walk forward, walk free, and let their fiction collapse under the weight of your quiet, steady truth. Number 3, they start spreading subtle lies. When direct control no longer works, and your silence becomes harder to shake than your words ever were, manipulators reach for one of the most cowardly tactics left in their arsenal: distortion. They don't confront you, they contaminate the space around you, quietly, strategically, and from the shadows. They begin planting seeds of doubt, not with accusations, but with insinuations. They won't say, "You can't trust this person." Instead, they'll murmur, "Something feels off about them lately." They won't shout lies from rooftops. They'll whisper suggestions in the right ears, at the right moments, with just enough ambiguity to avoid responsibility, but enough poison to turn the atmosphere against you. They twist your words, reframe your boundaries as arrogance, turn your clarity into coldness. And they wait, not for you to fall, but for others to quietly pull away. This is no longer about manipulating your choices. It's about manipulating perception, sabotage disguised as concern. And their aim is simple. If they can't make you question yourself, they'll try to make others question you. Not with truth, but with confusion. Not with confrontation, but with erosion. Here's where Stoic clarity becomes not just helpful, but essential. Seneca once said, "Truth is simple, lies require complication." And this is the lens you must see this tactic through. The person who needs to twist the story, twist the tone, and twist the timeline just to get others on their side isn't acting from strength, they're acting from weakness. Because truth doesn't need to manipulate. Truth stands still. This tactic works because it feeds on momentum. It leverages how fast suspicion spreads and how slow discernment walks. But the Stoic doesn't chase every rumor. They don't run from shadow to shadow, trying to reclaim every narrative. They remain grounded, because they know that nothing collapses faster under scrutiny than a web of subtle lies, and nothing stands longer than a life lived in alignment with virtue. Let me tell you about someone I once knew. His name was Daniel. He worked at a company where he was known for being principled, deliberate, and steady. One day, he refused to cut corners on a project a colleague had rushed through. No argument, no drama, just quiet refusal to compromise. The colleague didn't confront Daniel. Instead, over the next few weeks, vague comments began circulating. Daniel's becoming territorial. He's difficult to collaborate with. Not accusations, just quiet suggestions, scattered like ashes on the wind. Daniel heard whispers, but he didn't chase them. He didn't hold meetings to clear his name. He didn't demand validation. What he did was far more powerful. He stayed the course. He upheld the same standard. He treated others with respect. He let his consistency do the speaking. And slowly, the fiction unraveled, because the people who watched quietly saw the truth for themselves, and the one who spun the lies. Eventually, he was exposed, not because Daniel fought him, but because he never needed to. So when someone tries to smear your name in soft tones and quiet corners, remember this. First, don't run after every rumor. That's exactly what they want, to turn your strength into panic, your stillness into reaction. Stay rooted. Second, let your actions speak. Your life, how you show up, how you treat others, how you remain clear, is the only defense that needs no defense. And third, trust that time reveals what intention tries to hide. The longer you walk in truth, the more their lies begin to sound like noise. You don't need to shout. You don't need to prove. You only need to keep being who you are. At the end of the day, someone who needs to twist the truth to feel in control has already admitted they stand on nothing solid. Let them complicate. You keep it simple. Let them perform. You stay grounded. Because the truth, it doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to last. And it always does. Number 4, they isolate you from others. One of the most calculated tactics a manipulator will use when they feel their influence fading is not to attack you directly, but to quietly reshape the world around you, not by force, but by distortion, not by removing you physically, but by isolating you subtly, socially, and emotionally. They begin not with confrontation, but with whispers. A hesitant comment here, a raised eyebrow there, a carefully timed sigh in a room full of silence. It's never bold, it's never obvious, and that's what makes it so effective. It's slow erosion, not a landslide. They might say something like, "I don't know what's going on with them lately," or "They seem different these days, right?" Just enough to plant doubt, just enough to make others pause. And that pause, that's all they need. Because now the air around you begins to shift. Conversations grow shorter, eye contact fades, invitations stop coming. And suddenly, you're not just standing alone, you're wondering why you're alone. Here's the truth. They don't need to change what you do. They only need to change how others feel around you. Because when people begin to step away, even slightly, you begin to question your footing. And in that space of confusion, you become easier to sway, easier to silence, easier to control. The Stoics understood this tactic long before it had a name. Seneca warned, "Associate with those who will make a better man of you, not those who sow doubt behind smiles, not those who trade truth for influence, but those who sharpen your reason and reflect your integrity." The manipulator doesn't fear your actions. They fear your clarity. So, they move to isolate you, not to punish you, but to weaken your inner compass. Because it's easier to pull someone down when they stand alone. The fewer trusted voices you hear, the louder their whisper becomes. Let me share a story. There was a woman named Liana, part of a close-knit project team. She was thoughtful, principled, and unwilling to nod when something didn't feel right. One day she began setting firmer boundaries, challenging unrealistic deadlines, and advocating for the team's well-being. It wasn't dramatic, it was deliberate, but it made someone uncomfortable, a teammate who had grown used to her silence. Instead of responding directly, he began planting little doubts. "Liana's been a little intense lately, don't you think?" Or, "It's just hard to talk to her these days." Nothing overt, just enough to make people shift in their seats. Slowly, meetings felt colder. Colleagues became distant. Something had shifted, and Liana could feel it. But she didn't panic. She didn't rush to defend herself or demand explanations. She did what a Stoic would do. She stood firm in her principles. She showed up consistently, contributed meaningfully, and stayed anchored in reason. She didn't fight the story with more noise. She let her actions tell the truth. And in time, that's exactly what happened. Her colleagues began to see through the fog. They compared the whispers to the reality. And when the two didn't match, the illusion collapsed. So how do you respond when someone tries to isolate you? First, recognize the tactic. The power of manipulation is lost the moment you can name it. Don't let it creep in undetected. Second, stay grounded in your integrity. Don't shift who you are just because the room shifts around you. Your consistency is your clearest signal. And third, protect your connection with those who truly see you. You don't need everyone. You just need a few who know your heart and who won't be swayed by vague suggestions. Remember this: isolation is a tactic of illusion. It creates distance by distorting perception. But the truth is magnetic. It always draws the right people back to you, even if it takes time. So stand tall, speak plainly, live clearly, and let the fog fall away on its own. Number 5. They use guilt to make you comply. When all other tactics lose their grip, when logic no longer sways you, when silence no longer unsettles you, when their control begins to slip, manipulators often reach for one final weapon: guilt. Not the loud kind, not the kind that argues or begs. No, this one walks softly, cloaked in disappointment and spoken in quiet tones. But its aim is direct: to make you fold, not through reason, but through shame. It sounds like this: "After everything I've done for you, I guess none of that meant anything. Wow, I never thought you'd be like this." It's not love, it's not concern, it's emotional coercion disguised as care, a calculated play on your empathy, a tool not to build bridges, but to bend your will. Here's the truth: they use guilt because it works. Not because they're right, but because they've learned that a few well-placed words, said in just the right way, can override your clarity and turn your conscience against you. They don't have to raise their voice or demand obedience. Just a sigh, a wounded tone, and a quiet withdrawal is enough to make you question your choices, your worth, even your heart. And that's what makes this tactic so exhausting, because guilt doesn't come at you like a storm. It creeps in like a fog. You start apologizing for things that don't need apologies. You agree to things you don't believe in. You silence your needs to avoid hurting someone who was never hurt by your honesty, but by your independence. But a Stoic knows, if someone truly values your spirit, they won't burden it with emotional chains. They'll honor your choices, even when they're not the center of them. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And nowhere is that mastery more necessary than when guilt is being used not as a call to conscience, but as a leash. Let me tell you a story. A woman I once knew, let's call her Clara, had a relative who mastered the art of subtle guilt. When Clara took a job out of state to grow a career, her aunt didn't say, "I'm proud of you." She said, "I guess family doesn't mean anything to you anymore." When Clara couldn't attend a gathering, it was never, "We'll miss you." It was, "Wow, after all I've done for you." No arguments, no demands, just silence, hurt glances, and heavy words left hanging. For years, Clara gave in. She overextended. She said yes when she meant no. She poured from a cup that was already empty, just to avoid the crushing weight of disappointment. Until one day, she paused and asked herself a single question. Would I ever speak to someone I love the way she speaks to me? That question changed everything. She began responding not from fear, but from strength, not from guilt, but from truth. She didn't become unkind, she became clear. She didn't stop caring, she stopped complying out of shame. The shift wasn't dramatic, but it was powerful, and it restored her peace. So, how do you respond when someone uses guilt to manipulate your compassion? First, recognize the pattern. Their words are not a mirror of your actions. They're a strategy to regain influence. Know the difference. Second, pause before you respond. Ask yourself, am I doing this because I choose to, or because I fear the consequences of choosing otherwise? That moment of clarity protects your soul. Third, set boundaries, not with cruelty, but with certainty. You don't owe anyone your exhaustion just because they once did you a favor. You don't owe your peace to those who mistake your kindness for obligation. At the end of the day, guilt only has power when you believe you've done something wrong. But asserting your independence, honoring your limits, and protecting your inner stability are not wrong. They are wise. And those who genuinely love you will never make you feel smaller for protecting your own soul. Stay firm, stay kind, and above all, stay free. Number 6. They try to destroy your confidence. There comes a point when the manipulator, having lost their grip on your choices and emotions, turns to something darker, an attack not on your actions, but on your identity. They try to destroy your confidence, and they don't do it with loud insults or obvious disrespect. They do it slowly, strategically, with smiles, with subtle jabs, with phrases disguised as concern. Are you sure that's the smart move? You've been different lately, just looking out for you. Must be nice when things just fall into your lap. None of it sounds brutal at first. That's the point. Their words are crafted not to startle you, but to disorient you, to chip away at your certainty until you no longer trust your own instincts. Because here's the truth. If they can't dominate you directly, they'll make you doubt yourself so deeply that you'll begin to hand them back the power they lost, voluntarily. And when you stop making bold moves, when you begin to hesitate, when you seek their approval again, not out of trust, but out of confusion, that's when they've won. Not by earning your faith, but by weakening your sense of self. This is where Stoicism becomes more than theory. It becomes armor. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That sentence isn't poetic. It's a command. And in moments like these, it becomes your anchor. Let me tell you about someone I knew. His name was Caleb. Driven, thoughtful, and clear-minded. But the relationship he was in began to shift that. Every win was minimized. Every step forward was met with skepticism. He'd get a promotion and hear, "Connections help, don't they?" He'd make an independent choice and be asked, "Are you sure you're not rushing things?" Over time, the confidence that once defined him dimmed, until a friend, quietly, honestly, said, "You're not the same, and it's not growth, it's erosion." That moment shook him awake. He realized he hadn't changed. He had been changed, and the person he had become wasn't the product of his choices, but of someone else's fear of his strength. So he walked away, rebuilt, not with noise, but with focus, and the clarity returned, not because someone gave it to him, but because he stopped letting someone take it. So what do you do when someone tries to undermine your confidence? First, recognize the pattern. These are not careless remarks. They are deliberate. Understand them as attempts to confuse, not guide. Second, guard your mind. Keep a record of your wins. Revisit your values. Reaffirm the truths that make you steady. Write them down. Return to them. And third, be deliberate with who you allow to speak into your life. Choose those who reflect clarity, not fear. Because your confidence is not arrogance. It's the byproduct of a life lived in alignment with reason. Remember, no one can destroy your confidence unless you surrender it. And a Stoic never surrenders what is theirs to guard. Number 7. They offer fake reconciliation. When every tactic has failed, when manipulation, guilt, and subtle control no longer work, there's one final move left in the manipulator's playbook: false reconciliation. It comes dressed in softness, regret, nostalgia, a shift in tone that feels genuine. They say, "I've been thinking a lot," or "I miss the way things used to be," and on the surface, it feels like peace. But beneath that sudden warmth is the same old strategy: to reclaim access. Not to make amends, but to reset the cycle. This isn't healing, it's recalibration. They've realized that confrontation won't win you back, so now they use vulnerability, carefully chosen words, the illusion of growth. They mirror your journey, promise change, apologize just enough. But the goal remains: regain your trust, only to re-establish control. This is where Stoic clarity becomes essential. Epictetus warned, "He who does not observe deceit is not truly wise." Forgiveness is virtuous, but letting the same pattern harm you twice is not. Let me tell you a story. A woman I once knew, let's call her Alina, cut ties with someone who had chipped away at her peace for years. She rebuilt herself with silence, with clarity, with strength. Months passed. Then came the message: "I've changed. I see now what I couldn't before." He spoke of therapy, accountability, growth. Alina hesitated. She wanted to believe. So she let him in, slowly. At first, things felt different. Then came the subtle critiques, the emotional shifts, the quiet pressure. The tactics hadn't disappeared. They had evolved. He hadn't changed. He had just become more careful. So how do you protect yourself? First, take your time. True transformation is slow and consistent, not sudden and emotional. Second, observe their actions, not their tone. Are they respecting your space or gently testing your limits? Third, ask the hardest question of all. Are they genuinely different, or are you just drawn to the mask they wear now? The Stoic doesn't just forgive, they discern. Because wisdom is not in how many times you say yes, but in how well you guard your peace after finally saying no. Not every apology deserves a return. You can forgive, but never forget the pattern. When someone shows you, again and again, who they truly are, the wise choice isn't to wait for change. It's to honor the clarity and walk forward with strength. If this message spoke to you, feel free to subscribe for more insights that help you protect your peace. And in the comments, share your thoughts with "See It Clear." Remember, your boundaries are not a wall, they're a doorway to your freedom. And in the next video, we'll dive even deeper into how to stand firm without losing your compassion.